and Happy New Year to you as well. New beginnings. Time to start over again.
There you go.
How are you doing, Aiden?
I'm good, Tammy. How you doing?
Good, thanks. So I started the recording. Today's not going to be a long one. Again, it's going to be brief. As you can see, the screen that I have up, the Corp Info-2, it's only a half a page. So I'll try to make it as quick as possible. So I've been on the phone all morning with last minute things that were coming in, and I didn't get to eat breakfast. So I do have some oatmeal cooking on the stove that I'm going to have to stop briefly and stir or turn off. Okay, so hang in with me there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I went to Master Files Corporation and I hit modify, and now I'm in the corporation record on the Corp Info-2 team. And on the top left-hand side, this area reports net amount formula. This gives customers the ability to change how their POs are calculated. Now, we don't usually deviate from this default here, but just be aware that there are differences. If anyone ever asks, you can say it's configurable. We have several different options. And then you would come here and you would show them so that they would know that these are the options that they have. It's their decision. We don't ever recommend how they calculate it. We just let them know that it's available. They let us know what they want it to look like, and then we come in here and configure it for them. Just under that, email server name, encryption, this whole area here on the left, not on the right. This whole area here is only for customers who are premise-based. Because ePMX sends the actual email alerts out, if they're premise-based and not hosted by us, then we can't do that. ePMX can't send them out. So they have to enter their server information here. And again, this isn't something that you need to get into any detail with the customer with. It's important to know this is for their IT team to fill out. We have instructions that we send them. They're on Dropbox somewhere. I've only ever had one customer who wanted to do this, and they canceled. That was Goodwill of New York. Once they got to us and they realized that we don't really have a true Active Directory integration, they decided to cancel with us. So just be aware that it's here and it's available. Now, this is where we set the approval options if a customer is going to use purchasing approvals. This is the least, so requisitions is the most used approvals. Purchasing is the second most used, and invoicing is the least used approval method. But it's important to know that it's here. And it's also important to know that the options in purchasing, if someone says to you, well, I don't think we need requisitions. If we can do PO approvals, then we can just use purchasing. We don't have to buy a requisitions module. Well, perhaps that's true, and that does work for some of our customers. But notice when you hit the drop down right here, there's only 3 approval methods. Now, if I go to the Rec Info tab and I go to the approval section, notice there's 5 options. Okay, so there's a difference depending on how they want their approvals to happen. If they say, well, it's by item, well, then they have to have the requisitions module because that's not an approval method available in POs. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, so the disable auto approve is something that I do almost all the time. I do it as a default when I deploy and release a site to a customer because most customers don't want people to not look at what they're approving, right? So if you think about it in terms of controls and controlling spending, to give users the ability to auto approve something right from an email without even going into the software and looking at it, there could be notes in there. There could be specs. So a lot of times customers want them to be able to, they want to force them to look at it. So we disable auto approve. But if there's a customer who says, no, we don't care. Our CEOs who are going to be approving are busy. They don't have to look at everything. then we'll give them the ability to auto approve. Okay, so what this does is it disables the link in the email if you put a check mark here, and it grays out the option to auto approve in the requisitions, in the purchasing approval screen. Okay. Now, of course, we always want to have a check mark in here to notify the buyer when the PO is approved, but this is where it happens. Do you want the buyer to be notified? Yes. Well, then you better put a check mark here when you deploy and configure the site. Now, sometimes customers have multiple buyers, and there's several different ways to flag buyers in ePMX. And I'm not going to get into all of them today because we'll do that as we continue through the software. But this is the way that I recommend the most to people. And what I do is, so oftentimes, like I'm going to use Pure Dental Brands as an example. Pure Dental Brands has one buyer, but what if she's out? How's anybody going to access any of her stuff? So what I tell people is create a generic email address, purchasing@puredentalbrands.com. Share that email address. Like, you know how we all share the customer service email address? Share that email address with whoever her backup is or whoever all the buyers are. There's a couple different ways you can use it. If you have multiple buyers, then everybody gets the notification and they can pull out their own, right? They'll get the email, they can pull out their own. Or if somebody's out, they can cover for them. So to me, that works the best. And that is what, since I came up with the idea, that is what all of our clients do. Pretty sure that it's all of them. So then you would put that email address here. Now, in order to do that, you'd have to create a user called purchasing user, which is exactly what I do. So when you're ever looking at someone's site, if you see a user called purchasing user, then you'll know why it's there. And that email address is right here. And then their IT team has to share that email address with the people that are involved with that group. Okay, now it doesn't take away from licensing. Someone will ask you, well, that's going to use our licensing. Is that not a license we have to pay for? No, because we don't assign it any modules. It's just a user that sits in ePMX with no permissions so that we can utilize this email address. It bypasses the licensing by doing it this way. Now, when you log in as a purchasing user, you can't see anything and you can't do anything. But the minute you assign permissions to that purchasing user, it'll pull from your licensing. So we don't do it that way. We set it up with no access, no user class, so that it doesn't touch their licensing. Okay, does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so over on the right, we have update material costs at PO entry. And this is, I always put a check mark in here because in the material file, your customers are going to enter a standard unit cost, but that price is going to change over time. And you want ePMX to update that. So we put a check mark here, and every time you create a PO with a different price, it will update that material file standard unit price.
Okay.
Update catalog prices when material cost changes. Now, you know, we have catalogs, right? So you might think that because the material file is updated when a PO is entered, that it would automatically update the catalog. And logically, that's how it should work, but that is not how it works. So if you want the catalog, if you're using catalogs and you want them updated, then there has to be a check mark in here as well. So in summary, coming from a sales perspective, well, what if the price changes? The questions that I've heard. Well, we can configure it so that it updates it every time you create a PO. Will it update the catalog too? We can configure it to do that, if that's what you want. We don't want it to. Okay, well, then we can configure it to do that too. Okay. So those are the questions that I've had, the questions I've heard, and the things that I've seen that you may come across. Now, update vendor unit price at PO entry. So the vendor unit price is in the vendor file, right? So if the vendor's unit price changes and you have a vendor flagged in the tied to that item in the material file, then it will also update the vendor unit price each time you enter a PO and save a PO.
Okay.
All right, so any questions on these three? Do you understand how that ties into several different files?
Nope.
Not for me.
All right, so budgets. Budgets aren't automatically turned on in EPMX when a site is deployed. Not all customers use budgets. And to be honest with you, even though on your end, your customers all excited they're going to use budgets, by the time they get to us, a lot of times they are so overwhelmed with the entire process that budgets is the last thing on their mind. So I can tell you that I have only even tried to implement budgets for 2 people in the entire time that I've been here. Most of them say we'll do it later because it's a lot. And they also often have to change the way they do budgets, because budgets are tied to a GL account code. There is no other way to do a budget. So Here's what I'm going to tell you, because I have received the same email over and over and over again from even the same people. There is only one way to do budgets. It is in the GL account code. That's it. You can't do it by project. You can't do it by job code. You can only do it by GL account code. So if they say, well, we have budgets for our project, okay, great. Create one GL account code, assign it a budget, and assign that GL account code to your project. Okay? You're still tying the budget to the GL account code.
Right.
Well, we use many GL account codes. Okay, we can assign all of them, but they're not going to tie into one budget. They're going to tie into multiple budgets, because each GL account code stores a budget, right? So, so that is how budgets work. The only way that budgets work. And most people, when they say we have budgets for our project, the only way it's going to work for them is if they assign one GL account code to that project and assign a budget to that GL account code. And then, they'll have to do their adjusting entries. If you know anything about accounting, they do adjusting entries every month, every quarter, every year to balance everything out properly. And they'll have, they can run reports, and they can do adjusting journal entries. And that's what I tell people. Okay, so budgeting has to be turned on. So oftentimes we'll use budget period 13. So there's 12 months in a year, right? So obviously you can have up to 12 budgets. You can also have 4 budgets. You can have budgets every quarter. You can also have one annual budget. There's a few different ways that you can do that. But budget period 13, there is no 13th month. So we leave that to total all periods. So if it's March and I want to run a report on what I spent for the year, I'm going to look at budget period 13 when I run my report, and that's going to give me the totals. Okay, that's where EPMX will calculate that information. So customers have several different options when it comes to budget. They can have no budget control, meaning if they have a budget in that GL account code and somebody creates a requisition, they will not get any message at all. It'll just go through. It would be, at that point, the manager's responsibility to review the budget and then either approve or reject their request. You could set it so that they get a warning only. So a box pops up and it says, hey, you're over budget. You click OK, but it still lets you enter that requisition. And again, when it gets to the manager, it's manager's responsibility to decide whether or not to adjust that budget, whatever it is that their SOP is. And then we have an over budget error, which means you're going to get that pop-up and it's not going to let you continue further. You'll have to reach out to someone outside of EPMX and have them adjust the budget if you want to place your request. Okay. Now, even though there's some options for budget period, we always choose the PO date. We never choose the revised budget date. This was set, our delivery date. This was established for one customer at one point who had a very specific need for it. However, if you use the revised delivery date, then your information when you're approving a requisition will not be timely. It won't be accurate. It won't be up to date. So we update at the point of the PO creation. Right? And then we turn on budget information right here by putting a check mark in it so that it displays throughout the software. All right, any questions about that?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay, just checking my oatmeal here. It looks like it's not cooking. All right, so the final one is delivery date. And I don't know that you'll ever need to discuss this with anybody, but for your own purposes, flowing through the software, you might want to set EPMX to automatically fill a delivery date for you, right? So when you're doing demos, this is something that Vinny and I need to get into detail with the customer. And I usually do this with them during the business assessment. I've started automatically sending them to Today Plus 5. And the people, since I started doing that, have been, yeah, that sounds good. And we just leave it like that. But here's what that does. I'm going to save this. And when you're creating a requisition and you're trying to flow through the software quickly, do this. There's one less field. Okay, I had to log out or refresh or whatever, but there's one less field that you have to fill out. You will not be able to save your request or your purchase order without a delivery date. Oh, right, I'm doing purchase order screen. Let me go there, sorry. I don't have any vendors yet. Okay, so what this does is as you're moving through software, it makes it a lot faster for you. So here, this field will show up blank. If it doesn't show up blank, it's one less field that you have to fill in. However, you can change it. So if it's set to autofill for Today Plus 5, but I need it tomorrow, I can come in here and click on this icon and I can change it to tomorrow and then save the PO.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Makes sense, everybody? Did we learn anything new today, or is this stuff you guys already knew?
Oh, this is
It's
new.
all new. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that would be a record, 17 minutes.
Awesome.
All right. So is there anything you guys want to talk about today? Anything I can help you with right now?
Nothing at my
How are you
end
making out?
for now.
No?
No.
How are you making
no.
out scanning those the dashboard activity, the search keywords?
Was that for me, Tammy?
Yeah. So have you been able to help anybody by scanning those search keywords in the Bellwether Management Console yet?
So I haven't started that as yet. So the last couple of weeks, I and Kevin we were working on something of in the lines of having a customer survey kind of a thing to be carried out with all our EPMX customers and try and get their responses on that.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't deployed that method as yet, but of course that's something I've noted down and I'll start doing that soon.
Okay. Well, to be honest, it only takes a couple seconds a day. It's a quick, easy couple seconds a day, and if you just put it on your calendar,
Right.
for every day, first thing in the morning, then it'll become muscle memory. And there isn't always somebody there, but
Correct.
I think the problem is when I talked to Kevin about it, the problem is being able to identify. Our customers don't always talk to us, as you know, and sometimes they just ignore us, and then all of a sudden they're gone. Well, this is another way for us to monitor that and to be able to identify potential issues. And if we're sending that out to them, offering them help, then it starts to build trust.
Correct.
So, okay, so there's that. And do you have, Karan, you can jump off if you want to. This is really just one question for Aiden.
Oh, sure. Thanks,
But
Tammy.
you can stay too. Okay,
Okay.
thanks. And Vinny's here too. So this is about the smart sheet. Do you have any questions about that?
No, so this was the sheet which was used during our bi-weekly call. Is that correct? So I just put in contact information of the accounts that I have reached out to during that particular span.
So during our calls, we're giving Kevin a report on people that we've contacted. Kevin needs to stay updated on that. So even though you're sending out emails, which Vinny and I do too, whenever we're working with customers, when we come together every 2 weeks, we need to have a summary of who we spoke to, who we reached out to, and some basic, simple notes. Don't have to go over unless Kevin starts asking more questions. But on this document, just some basic notes. Reached out.
Perfect.
This is the third time. Haven't heard from them. So you might want to keep track of this as you go, because I'm going to change the date because we've missed a couple weekends. But I'm probably going to make this through next week because that's when our next call is. But just if you need to add a line, just add a line. You'll probably have way more than Vinny and I have, especially since you're doing this primarily now.
Right.
Okay, and have it ready, before the meeting on Friday, on every other Friday. Okay?
Perfect. I'll do that going forward.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Vinny, anything to add?
I just wanted to check the name and
Can't hear you. Terrible feedback. Sounds like you're in a tunnel.
let me just a second.